Yes.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting, July 24th, of the Superintendent Advisory Council. My name is Jeff Powell. I'm the Superintendent of Rapides Parish Public Schools. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's meeting. As a reminder, we'd like to let all of the members of the committee remember to speak into your mics if you have something to say today. Also, we would like to have
Mr. Bartholomew,
here.
here, present. Mr. Burton,
Here.
present. Mr. Byler,
Here.
Mr. Cole,
Here.
present. Mr. Corley, absent. Mr. Eloy, Dr. Eloy, not present. Dr. Fontaine,
Here.
present. Dr. Gray, excused. Dr. Geis, Mr. Geis, I'm sorry, y'all have to excuse me. This is my first time. I apologize if I mess up. Okay, Mr. Geis, present. Mr. Jabia, present. Mr. Jones, present. Dr. Joseph, present. Mr. Martin,
Here.
present. Mr. Nikase, present. Dr. Orderly, present. Mr. Powell,
Here.
present. Dr. Stokes, present. Ms. Strong, excused. Mr. Touche, excused. Dr. Van Meter,
Here.
present. Dr. Boron, present. And Dr. Walker. Dr. Walker is excused. We do have a quorum.
Thank you so much. At this time, we'd like to extend a special welcome to Mr. Ben Nikase. I believe he's the newest member on the council, so welcome, Mr. Nikase. At the same time, we'd like to recognize Dr. Melissa Stilley, who I believe is in the audience. She has just rotated off of the council, so thank you, Dr. Stilley, for your many years of service to this council and all the great work that you're doing in Tangipahoa. Thank you. Yeah. We'd also like to recognize some special guests that are with us today. Bessie Board President, Mr. Ronnie Morris, is in the audience, as well as Dr. Armstrong and Mr. Conrad Apple. And so thank you for being present today. We'd also like to let everybody know that if you would like to make a public comment, we do have cards available for you to be recognized at the appropriate time to do so you can see Bessie's staff for that. With that, we would like to move forward with the next item on the agenda. And normally, this is the point where we would approve minutes from the previous meeting. However, we did not have a quorum at last month's meeting or the last meeting, so we're going to receive those minutes. Do I have a motion for that? Got a motion by Dr. Lewis Warren and a second by Mr. Keith Burton. Any questions about those minutes? Any comments on that? So we have received, so no further action. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you for making that first motion good. All right, so next item number 3, new standing item is considerations for revisions to bulletins in response to legislation of the 2025 regular legislative session. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Brumley for these motions.
Ms. Ashley Townsend will come up and share information around policy as it relates to actions from the previous legislative session.
Excuse me, Dr. Brumley, Mr. Tavares is correcting me that we do need a motion to receive this. Motion by Mr. Byler, second by Mr. Guy. Thank you. And they intentionally did it on my first day here. So I'm still trying to stand on the shoulders of Dr. Ordling and Mr. Jones, but we'll continue to move forward.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to overview a few of the acts from this past legislative session. There were almost 1,700 legislative instruments filed. We tracked about 150 of them, and we've narrowed that down to just a few to talk with you about today. Of course, we gave you a brief overview of two of them at your June meeting. And so we'll touch on that briefly today, but not go in too much depth there. And then just mention a few others. We do have our curated active note for system leaders is ready to deploy, and then we did the recorded overview again this year too, and you'll see both of those linked in next week's newsletter. And so if you want to share that with your team so that they can get an overview of some of the acts to pay attention to and some of the implementation actions you can expect from the department, that could help your teams as you prepare to implement these new laws. So the first one I wanted to highlight for you, of course, last year was the first year that Louisiana statewide for public schools went to a 10-point grading scale. This piece of legislation, in theory, shouldn't impact you all too much, except one thing to make sure to pay note to is that all the grades that get reported to the state for TOPS purposes on that TOPS core curriculum need to be on that 10-point grading scale. So we did make a support document if anyone needed to complete the conversion from this past year if it wasn't done that way, but that is the update on Act 356. In Bulletin 7, and of course you have these policy revisions with you in your packet. We're not going to go line by line through all of it today, but as always, please share with your teams if they see any issues or if they have any questions about any of it, please reach out. We would like to get it all right ahead of time. So next one, in Bulletin 746, you'll see two acts incorporated there. One is the numeracy professional development. So this expands that requirement from grades 4 through 8 math teachers to complete numeracy professional learning. Now it expands it to grades K through 3 math educators as well. And so it'll be that additional 2 years. So the requirement for 4th through 8th grade teachers to complete within 2 years of hire, that's in effect now or as of August 1st, 2025. And then for employees hired after August 1, 2027 in grades K through 3 math, they'll need to complete that numeracy professional learning within 2 years of hire there. This is also being incorporated into teacher prep programs as well. So in theory, within a few years, you'll have teachers coming through programs who've been exposed to foundational numeracy, and that professional learning module is also available on Canopy that you can use. Some of our prep providers are going to use that as well. So you'll see eventually a good deal of coherence between what the students are learning coming out of school and what you want your teachers to have in the classroom as well. You'll also see, so Act 649 is what was HB 684 that we talked about last time. This is the one related to seclusion and restraint for students with exceptionalities. The crisis intervention instruction is also being incorporated into teacher prep programs and for certification. And just to clarify a little bit there, so there are two levels of training there. So we've been calling them big training and little training. So there's the really intense training for restraint needs to be completed. This is in the law that it needs to be completed by anyone who's actually going to be performing that restraint. So a lot of you already use CPI training. That counts for this. We are also providing training for this that you'll all be able to access at no cost to you. That will count for this as well. So anyone who's going to be actually performing that restraint needs to go through this training. But then you have those situations where you have a general education teacher, this student with some challenging behavior issues is assigned to that teacher, and it would be helpful for that teacher to have some context, a little awareness about here's what these specialized issues could look like, here's what the law says your role is and is not, here's what you can expect from that person on campus who does have this specialized training. It's a much more shorter, consolidated training designed for people who aren't going to be actually performing the restraint, but need to have some awareness of what kinds of situations might necessitate that and what rules and regulations go along with that too. We have that training available for those teachers now as well. That's not mandated for everyone. That's something that your school leaders could say everyone needs, but really you could use that whenever it seems like this teacher is going to be assigned a student. They need that little bit deeper level of awareness, and that's available for you all at this time as well. Okay, there are several revisions to Bulletin 741, and you'll notice you have a set of them there with you now. There will also be some additional edits to that will come to August. Bessie, I think you'll be excited about. We're trying to really streamline and clarify the way those diploma requirement sections are listed out. So I think you'll be excited to see that. It's almost ready for you, but not quite. So look for that to come out, and I'm eager to hear your feedback on that. I think you'll like it. For legislative acts, we have two related to discipline. So Act 384 is the one where you need to be able to transfer a student's full disciplinary records whenever they move school. So if that student is moving out of your district or within your district, they need to have access to the full disciplinary record, including all that documentation related to any suspensions or expulsions, so that the receiving school can have the information they need to make the best decisions and support that student in being successful there. And then also some changes were made to the legislation from last year about mandatory expulsion for students found with tetrahydrocannabinol or the vapes that contain those substances. And so it's creating a discretionary expulsion on a first offense for that. And then the mandated expulsion moves from 4 semesters to 2 semesters for second or subsequent offenses. So you'll see those revisions reflected in Bulletin 741. We know that will affect your own local policy as well there too. There's also going to be a new reporting requirement in the law associated with that, where we'll need to be able to collect the number of students suspended or expelled for that certain subset of offenses in Revised Statute 17:416B and C. And we'll need to be able to tell who's suspended or expelled for that for a first offense, for a second or subsequent offense. And we'll also need to be able to collect who's completed an assignment at an alternative school or program and then come back into the regular setting after that. So we'll get out more information to you for how you'll need to collect that and report that to us at the end of the year. But I did want to put that on your radar, that that's a new required collection that we'll have to operationalize. And then I have Stephanie Luke with us to talk a little bit about Act 463 related to nutrition. Some changes to that one are coming as well. And as she makes her way up, we also some very brief updates about military status, adding that to one of the categories against which people can't be discriminated. And I'll let Stephanie talk about.
I'm Stephanie Loop. I'm the Executive Director of Child Nutrition here at the department. So in terms of nutrition, it's not going to go into effect for a couple of years. It'll be effective in school year 28-29. And there's a list of ingredients that are going to be prohibited from meals served for breakfast, lunch, or for after-school activities. So we have the list. We're communicating with your school food service directors about the change, about what's going to be required. The other piece of that is that foods should be purchased from within Louisiana to the maximum extent practicable. So again, we'll work with your food service directors on local procurement, whether that be produce or milk or different things that they can purchase from within the state that meet all the requirements for school meals. So happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
And then the last one in this set I wanted to point out to you related to instructional materials and the accessibility of those to parents. This is a new, it will require you to update some local policy there. If you don't have a fee schedule for any in-person copies, to create that fee schedule, and that will need to be turned into the department, and we're going to have to collect all those and send them over to the legislature. So just an advance notice to you to update those local policies, and we'll let you know the mechanism for turning those into us in an upcoming newsletter when it gets closer to time for that collection. I believe that report's due in February, so it'll be a little bit to give you enough time to make those changes. All right, and then next set of revisions, so Act 42 relates to the ability of your school systems to contract with transportation network companies to provide third-party transportation for students. So we're making some revisions to Bulletin 119 just to make sure that that alternative means of transportation is allowable within policy. But of course, this is all up to your districts to be able to contract with those companies as you would like to do. The law laid out certain technical specifications that the company will have to provide, certain qualifications of drivers, but all of that is just something that your districts may or may not decide to do, and we're just making way in policy for you all to be able to do that if you choose to. The School Employee Bill of Rights is there as well, and this will need to be distributed to certain employees, so just wanted to put that on your radar to be aware of. at 449 requires vocational and technical education, and it makes some specific requirements as well that if a school system is receiving CDF funds for a certain course, a student can't also be charged a fee for participation in that course. So wanted to make that piece of that law um, aware for you all as well. And then at 409, we talked about this one a little while in your last meeting, and we talked through the specific requirements that will be applicable to your pre-Ks. So for Montessori and public school pre-K programs, they'll need to put this page on the wall that we have in their pre-K classrooms, and it'll also need to go home to parents at the beginning of the year. You can distribute this electronically or via paper. And this is the list of those 15 minimum standards that are in Charlie's Law. We're required to have a complaint line for LDOE at the bottom, but we also made space for you to have a local complaint line as well if you would rather than to call your building principal or someone at your school board office when they're having an issue. You can put that number in that space. This is available on our early childhood page of our website and on our school policy page on our website now. And our protocol for all of you will really be to say, we'll call you up as a superintendent. We'll send you something in writing so that you got it for your records, and we have it for our records. And we'll say, hey, we received a complaint from someone in your district about a pre-K program, and then we'll let you handle that as you see fit within your district. So that's the process that is in the law for us to handle that with all of you, which I think is pretty consistent with how we handle those things mostly now, but it makes it a little more formal. But that document to distribute at the beginning of school is available now. So there's 15 standards to be met. And then one of the two other things I wanted to call out for you too in this one. So starting August 1st, new hires will need to pass a state central registry in that DCFS Child Abuse and Neglect Registry check. And so we have worked with OTS and DCFS to make that system accessible for you all through your existing EdLink security logins. So starting on August 1st, you'll see a new permission that you can grant for people who should be allowed to access that system. It is very sensitive information, and DCFS manages all of that platform. We're just giving you a way to have a streamlined means of accessing that. The clearance won't go through LDOE at all. You'll just be able to use those same EdLink systems to grant access to the people who should be able to access it, and then to be able to access the DCFS system itself. So starting August 1st, if you have questions about how to grant that permission or how to give users access, your data managers can reach out to our team about that. If you have questions about navigating the actual child abuse and neglect system, that would be a DCFS question, and they'll have people available to help you with that as well. They are aware that there is going to be an increased volume of registry checks requested, so they asked for patience, but they're also bringing additional staff in to help them navigate that with you too. So wanted to pass that along, and hopefully we'll make that as streamlined as possible. And then the last thing I wanted to point out on this one, this made some significant changes to the way that mandatory reporter training is required and the way that those cases of alleged child abuse and neglect are handled, including, for example, a requirement that parents of all the parents of any children involved be notified whenever a situation occurs. So I encourage you to review that, make sure that you update any local policy as needed to make sure that everything is in compliance with the law. That DCFS training is required every year. And so starting next school year, you'll need to report to LDOE the names of employees who have completed the training and the names of employees who have not completed the training by September 30th each year. So for this year, complete it as you usually do. Keep that certificate or that verification of training complete on file with you as you usually do. But then next year, there'll be a mechanism to report that to the department by September 30th of each year. And this is a training that has to be completed between June 1st and August 30th every year. DCFS also has shared that their training has been updated online to be in compliance with the new law and include the changes there. So any trainings completed in their online platform will be in compliance with the new law. And then, okay, are there any questions on this one? No, that was a lot.
Any questions or comments from the council members on any of the proposed bulletin changes up to this point. Dr. Warren?
I've got just a quick question. With the procedures that you spoke about with Edley, will we get something in writing with some directions to pass on to those who need it?
Yes, that will be coming out shortly. And the system will not be available before August 1st just because of the ability to get that information, and it is sensitive in nature. But yeah, you'll have communications with us from us about how to grant that permission.
Any other questions or comments from council members? Yes, ma'am, Dr. Joseph.
Sure, yeah. So the conversation came up during session whenever this bill is being discussed. Who's not offering CTE right now? Because the bill does require the CTE courses to be offered. It says that you can partner with your higher ed institutions, with other organizations to offer those. And so we ran some numbers just to see who's not really offering it. And it seemed that really the only schools that this is scooping in additionally now are maybe some charters that have a really unique purpose and mission that doesn't align with CTE, and then some of your special schools, some of your residential schools for students with disabilities, those missions may not align. So the discussion was just to create a mechanism by which Bessie could approve a waiver for that. But it looked like all of our traditional public school systems are in compliance already.
Excuse me, Dr. Joseph, if you wouldn't mind speaking into the microphone so we can hear.
Okay, but say if they don't, because they just don't have the resources or don't have the staff to conduct those things, how would that impact the accountability system and their, their scores and everything in that? Will it impact in any way?
And we do have, there are a variety of funding streams available to you to be able to offer CTE. So this is something that you all, we're happy to help problem solve with you about how you can offer a course to students. So if you feel like you're having issues with that, please let us know, and we're happy to help navigate that with you one-on-one.
My question is about if we do apply for, if the school applies for a waiver or the district applies for a waiver, how will that impact accountability?
The district applies for a waiver, how that impacts accountability. I mean, they wouldn't have
They would not
students
be a
to
part
be
of
able
that.
to check. Like the accountability system would stay the same, but they wouldn't be able to satisfy the post-secondary readiness using career courses at that time. They would have to satisfy it via one of the other methods.
Any more questions or comments from the council? Right, I think we have a few more to go through. Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
That was all from me. Of course, there were lots of other acts, so if you have questions about any of them, if you have questions about the policy when you see it, very happy to talk through all of that with you.
All right, did we have any public comments from the audience regarding any of the presentations so far? All right, to be heard. So with that, we have the option to receive, endorse, or not endorse the report we just received. Or we can take no action. Okay, I got a motion to receive by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Van Meter. We did 3.1, I believe is what we. Oh, okay. We had a motion to receive it initially, to open it, correct? And that's, no, yeah, to accept the report. Yeah. Hey, we're all good. Both of our first time. Mr. Martin and Van Meter second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Motion 3.2, consideration of an update report regarding literacy and numeracy initiatives. Do we have a motion to receive? Dr. Bartholomew, and second by Mr. Byler.
Thanks, Mr. Powell. So with the start of school upon us, we felt it was appropriate to share a little bit of information relative to literacy and numeracy. We're excited about the gains that we're seeing on both of those fronts, but at the same time, certainly have opportunities to improve. And so I asked Dr. Chasson to share some information with you all today. So Dr. Chasson, you're up.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. Good morning, everyone. Happy to bring you all some updates this morning from the Office of Teaching and Learning, and especially around literacy and numeracy. So I'll start, first of all, with a slide. It allows me to. I'll start anyway. I'll start first of all with a slide around ensuring healthy core instruction. And this may seem like just a run-of-the-mill type slide. Why wouldn't we be talking about what's happening in classrooms and core instruction? But, my team and I recently came across a bit of research that really stood out to us. And it says that if core instruction is healthy, then 75% of students are on grade level and above. And so when we are seeing data that less than 75% of students are on grade level and above, then we know that we have an issue with what's happening in core instruction. And so with that, I know we've spent a lot of time over the last 5 years really talking about things like intervention and tutoring, what's happening to meet really specific student needs in their learning gaps. And that's still important. It'll always be important. But we also really want to focus a lot of attention this upcoming year on what's happening during core instruction. And so these are just a few notes about things that we feel are most important. One being that school schedules should reflect adequate time to fully implement the selected curriculum for that grade level. This is not something that's easy to do, especially when you're also, being asked to provide those interventions, that tutoring for certain amounts of time. It can be difficult to juggle a school day schedule to ensure that this happens. But it's so important that we are really using that curriculum as it's intended within the full allotted time. And really will continue to put Band-Aids on student learning and have a need for tutoring and for interventions if we're not ensuring that the curriculum can be fully implemented within a school schedule. The next bullet is just something that we believe a lot in. I know you hear Dr. Brumley say at times that back to the basics approach. And that back to the basics approach for instruction really looks like these 3 key things. It looks like time that is devoted daily for explicit teacher-led instruction. We know that there is time and place for inquiry-based learning, for students to discover their learning. But there's also really important time, especially within those foundational skills around numeracy and literacy, for explicit teacher-led instruction. Equally as important is time for students to practice on their own, and then opportunities for students to receive that strong academic feedback that's going to improve their performance. And finally, school day embedded teacher collaboration is such an important piece of this, because we can't sit back and just wait for core instruction to improve or put enough time within the school day and pick a great curriculum and then expect instruction to improve. That teacher collaboration that should happen weekly at the school level is so important for driving those improvements in core instruction. We have a common language for high quality instruction and what that looks like with our new LEAD system and with that Louisiana Educator rubric. And it's so important for teachers to have that sacred time and space. I think if I went around to most schools and school systems around the state at this point and asked, are you engaging in weekly instructional leadership team meetings? Are you engaging in teacher collaboration? I think mostly everybody would say yes at this point. Most people are implementing some sort of ILT. You may call it something different. You may call your teacher collaboration something different. But they all look probably pretty similar, and teachers are coming together to collaborate. And so that really brings the question, at what quality? What's happening during those meetings, and how is it really driving improvements in the classroom? And so that's a special focus of our team this upcoming year that I wanted to let you all know about, is really about driving quality teacher collaboration. How do we make sure, our teachers' time is so sacred and so important? How are we making sure that they're getting the most out of that time to drive what's happening in their classroom. So really driving quality and teacher collaboration is our focus for this year, and that connection to improving core instruction as a result. The next slide is just about that extra dose that we know a lot of our students need, high dosage tutoring. We know that this comes as a result of Act 771 of 2024, and I'm still so grateful for the work that school systems and schools did last year, standing up that heavy programming. It was a lot to do very quickly, and overall, I think our state did an incredible job of just really rising to that challenge of implementing high dosage tutoring for our kindergarten through 5th grade students. We know that we once again received that $30 million appropriation, which is amazing, and I think going to be able to continue that work so well. Your plans will be due in EGMS by September 15th once again. And again, what I've heard across the state is, you know, we did the tutoring program last year. We had some hits and some misses. Some things worked, some things didn't. We learned a lot. And this year, we're really all about driving quality. What does that quality high dosage tutoring look like? How do we make sure that we're getting the most out of that instructional time between the tutors and our students? And so things like tutor selection and training, I know is really top of mind for you all. There are things that worked last year, things that you might want to do differently for this year, whether you're choosing a vendor or through your own LEA staff. But how are you making sure that those folks are chosen, selected wisely, and then trained appropriately and supported throughout the year so that what they're doing during tutoring can connect to what's happening in student learning during core instruction? And then finally, choosing materials that are high quality. I'm asked a lot, you know, what should we use during tutoring? And we have a tab within the tutoring plan, which was updated and sent out to you all in May, on those materials that can be used during that tutoring time. And those are materials that have been vetted very carefully for evidence so that we know that the materials that we're putting in front of students during that tutoring time will really make the most impact. And finally, just want to share with you all that we have reorganized our team here at the agency, and what was known as our Division of School Improvement, which was the team that is field-based and went out every day out into schools and school systems to support our schools with academic labels. That team has shifted, and we have now created a larger literacy team and a larger numeracy team. Our math team was quite small, doing some really amazing work with just a few folks, but we really wanted to expand that math reach, and we know that y'all have been using our literacy team that was before 9 members deep over the last few years to really go out and do some great support for you all, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback from that. So we thought it was important to expand their reach by really increasing the size. So we now have a much larger literacy team and numeracy team at the department as a result of reorganizing that school improvement team and those members. And so you will have an opportunity starting this school year to request services from those teams through a new menu of services. So if you're used to the way that the school improvement team used to work, you had a single point of contact and you signed a memorandum of understanding with us, and we were able to push out into your schools and into your school system and support those schools around school improvement functions. And so we'll work somewhat the same in that we're still going to go out and provide great high quality services, but they will be specifically focused around literacy and numeracy. So still supporting teacher collaboration, instructional leadership teams, classroom observations and feedback, but doing so from content experts and with a focus on content and curriculum implementation. So you'll still designate a single point of contact. When I floated this idea and got some input from some superintendents, they noted that they really liked having a single point of contact from your end, so that you can really organize yourselves and know when a member of our team might be coming to you. And so you'll still designate a single point of contact from your school system who can request support from the literacy and numeracy teams. And that will be available to you all beginning next Friday, August 1st, on our system leader call. So we'll release the menu of services, and you will have a mechanism by which you can go online and request services from those teams. And we're happy to come out and support your schools with academic labels or your schools that might not have labels that you feel need extra support in an area. we can also support you at the school system level with your overall literacy and numeracy plan. So we're really excited about that shift and looking forward to even better being able to support you all, especially around literacy and numeracy this upcoming year.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chasson. Any questions or comments from the council members? Mr. Byler?
Dr. Chasson, just high dosage tutoring again is outside the MFP, correct? Any ideas? Have they given you guys any ideas when, where that will drop?
The funding
Yes.
from tutoring? Yes, sir. So similar to last year, it's written into legislation that you all have a plan due by September 15th. And we have that plan in EGMS because that's just the easiest way for us to collect it and give feedback. So your plan is due September 15th, and then you would receive your allocation once it is approved. So when you submit that plan and that plan is approved, if your plan is not approved, it will be returned to you with feedback for you to make adjustments. We'll go through that process, and then you would get that allocation. We are bringing these allocations to the August BESI meeting. But if you have not completed your Q4 fiscal reporting, you will not be eligible for an August allocation. So just, I think that's a really important thing to note. I'm glad you asked that question, because you all do need to ensure that you have completed your fiscal reporting in EGMS from last year so that we can release those funds for this upcoming year.
Do we know if we have not done that?
Yes, you received, your EGMS point of contact received an email this week.
And that allocation is formula-based, correct? By the number of students?
It is. And so you can expect a similar amount to what you received last year. We didn't see huge differences in the number. A difference might be if you did not spend your total allocation last year, you may receive a reduced allocation this year.
It's been allocated to Rapides Parish. Any amounts you didn't spend last year. Any other questions or comments from the council?
One thought on that, Mr. Powell, we are, for the first 5 school years of our work, we really focused on school systems that wanted that level of support for their labeled schools. We didn't push in unless you wanted us to be there. And then we would sign an MOU, and we would use our school improvement team to support in really a standard way. But we just felt like the demands, well, 2 things. One, the importance alone of literacy and numeracy to our state, particularly in the foundational years, warranted us to make a shift. But 2, the demands that we were receiving from some of you all in terms of requesting support in those areas were more than we could handle in the way in which we were previously structured. And so Dr. Chasson and I spent a lot of time thinking about ways to approach this moving forward. So we shifted some things around, went through civil service, got some approvals. And so what she's referencing about next week is you're actually going to get this menu of services that we are offering to you all as our teams being willing to come out and support in specific ways. So in the same way you go to your favorite restaurant and you say, I'd like to order this, you're going to actually from the menu say, hey, I'm placing our order for our school system for this. We'd like support here through that one point of contact on your team. We're really excited about it. We think it makes sense for us, and it's another way in which we can support you because we know that, not every system has every level of expertise at certain levels, depending on the staffing and resources that you have. So we're really excited about this and hope that you take advantage of it.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. Mr. Jones?
So for school districts that may already be partnering with a third-party vendor, how would it look from the perspective of alignment with the Department of Education coming in and that third-party vendor maybe already offering support in numeracy and literacy? Would there be like a working together, or has the department thought about that?
We have indeed. So if your third party who's assisting you is someone who's already on one of our approved vendor guides, we already have a partnership with them. We already work closely so that we can align in language and approach. That works better with some entities than with others, in all honesty. That partnership is stronger by people who maybe have more of a footprint here in Louisiana. but we are happy, and this is something my team has done, and we're happy to continue doing, and especially through this new menu of services, coming out and doing visits alongside that third party, meeting with all of you at the table at once so that we can align on support and really have that coherent approach, all speaking the same language. That's something we're happy to do, is walk alongside you and that third party vendor.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Any public comments on this motion? I would like to take this opportunity to show appreciation for Dr. Chasson and her team, as well as Mr. Trey Foss, as y'all come around to support systems and teams around coherence and each of the topics that you've spoken of. All of our teams in Rapid East Parish, and I think around our regions for sure, are appreciative and learning and growing from it. So thank you. All right, with that, we'll entertain a motion to accept or endorse or not endorse this particular motion. Mr. Burton makes a motion to endorse this presentation. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Jones, all right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much, Dr. Chasson. All right, we're going to move to item number 4, which is a standing item, consideration for issues regarding assessment accountability, specifically item 4.1, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding banking scores for middle school students who score mastery or advance on high school LEAP 2025 assessments. I need a motion to receive. And we have a motion from Dr. Joseph and a second from Mr. Geis.
So at the last meeting of the state board, there was interest in this conversation around students who take high school courses in 8th grade, and the way in which the performance of those students is counted in the accountability system, and the way in which it will be counted in the revised system. And so our board entertained conversation around that at their last meeting, and I don't think that they were at a level of comfort around what decision needed to be made at that point. And so they deferred that item so that we could gather additional information from them, and so we could have the conversation or present some data here to you all. And we'll do the same thing for the Accountability Council. And so hopefully, as a result of that, our board will have the information that they need to make any decision relative to the way in which these courses in 8th grade impact on the revised accountability system. So our goal here today is to provide some information to you all around this topic. And as I've shared with leadership of the Superintendents Association, if there's something else that you'd like to know or want to know, just tag us and let us know that you have interest in that. We may not be able to turn it around in 24 or 48 hours, but we'll certainly do our best to try to support whatever needs you may have. Mr. Lambert and his team do a really good job of that, and they're constantly crunching numbers. And so, Thomas, at this point, you can just work through these data slides so everyone can get a sense of the request that was made and what those numbers reflect.
Sure, absolutely. Excuse me, Mr. Lambert. Dr. Bromley, before we get into his presentation, I specifically wanted to ask, the motion says consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding this topic, but there's no backup with any suggested revisions for us to be considering. Is there a copy of
I think the motion that was made at the last meeting would have prompted revisions to the bulletin, but before making any of those revisions, they wanted to receive data such as this. So the backup is essentially the data.
Okay.
And if the board chooses to, go this way or that way, then we would then know the way in which we needed to adjust policy to reflect that.
So essentially, we're just fixing to receive a report from Mr. Lambert.
That's right.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. That's a little different from what the actual motion says, but we've accepted to receive this motion, but it's simply to not revisions to any bulletin. It's to receive what report Mr. Lambert's going to bring.
That's right. So what you'll see here is some data around the students who are taking Algebra 1. It's about 15% of Louisiana's 8th graders are taking Algebra 1. And of those 15%, about 85% score mastery or advanced on Algebra 1. This chart, which you'll pardon that it is a little bit difficult to read, we've experimented with different types of graphs, but by the time you explain how to read the graph, you could just explain the chart. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at that advanced column at the top. The advanced column at the top tells you the kids, that column is all the kids who scored advanced in 8th grade. The row going across is what they scored in 7th grade. So where you see the intersection, that tells you that the kids that scored advanced in 7th grade, advanced in 8th grade, there were 944. Kids who scored advanced in 7th grade, kids who scored mastery in 8th grade, 274. So you're seeing some shifting down. You also see some shifting up in here. But at its core, you're seeing 85% of students scoring proficient. It is not surprising that students would score better on the 8th grade algebra or the Algebra 1 exam than they did on 7th grade math. 7th grade math covers 5 or 6 different mathematical domains. Algebra 1 covers 2, algebraic thinking and functions. It's not surprising that students might do better in a course that is highly tailored to 2 particular domains that are taught over the course of a year than 5 or 6. So it's not surprising to see students sliding forward. There was a study published in the mid to late 2000s that talked about students' long-term effect in algebra, that for some students it's really good, and for some students you see a short-term bump and then a long-term decline in terms of pre-calculus, calculus, algebra 2, because they missed core geometric thinking and functions, and Algebra 1 doesn't cover those. Any questions on this slide?
I had one question, Mr. Lambert. When you look at, compare slide 17 and 18, it appears as though there were about, if my just visual math is about 8,500 students or so that took Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, but then the chart on page 18 only counts 6,900.
Because they needed a 7th grade score to go on the second chart.
So you had about 600 students that took algebra in the public school setting last year that we did not have a 7th grade score for the previous year.
They could have come from another state, private school, etc.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. Any other questions on that? Those? Okay.
The rows are the 7th grade scores. The columns are the 8th grade. So, yep. So 771 students scored mastery in 7th. Yeah. Yes. We went around and around on a couple different ways to display this, and decided that this was best, and we could just talk through it.
If I could just add to that, Mr. Chair, we took the same table and put it in percentages. For those students in 7th grade that were advanced, in 7th grade, 77% of them remained advanced. For those that were in mastery, 18% remained mastery. 76% remained mastery, with an additional 18% moving up to advanced. For those that were basic in 7th grade and took the 8th grade Algebra 1, those that remained were 37%, yet 48% increased to mastery, from basic to mastery. And for those approaching basic, 46% remained approaching basic, 27% increased to basic, 7%, an additional 7% increased to mastery, 0% advanced. And for those unsatisfactory, it seems as though 41% remained unsatisfactory, 26% moved up to approaching basic, 13%, an additional 13% moved up to basic, 18% moved up to mastery, and 3% up to advanced. So just represented in percentages, maybe a little bit easier than numbers.
Leap.
And that is, if you sat down, or who was a math teacher on the, yeah, So like the mathematical concepts that are taught in 7th and 8th grade are very different from what's done in Algebra 1. 7th and 8th grade covers statistics and probability. Statistics and probability is not covered in Algebra 1. There's angle relationships that are taught in 7th and 8th grade that you need when you get to geometry and Algebra 2 that are not covered in Algebra 1. So what you're seeing there is a test that has a bunch of things that are being assessed across basic arithmetic all the way to ratios in 7th and 8th grade that does not occur in Algebra 1. So you would see a bump for, I mean, I'm sure that if you look at your 8th grade to 9th grade Algebra 1 scores for your non-selected into Algebra 1 students, you see an increase from their 8th to 9th grade. And I mean, you'd have to go and look at your data and look at the teaching and learning, and you decide whether it is like much better teaching and learning or it might be something else. Yes. The 9th grade, the Algebra 1 scores are higher than the 8th grade math scores, pretty significantly.
I'll just say this because you referenced a study. I'm not sure what study you referenced in relative to how well those students are prepared for calculus or whatever it may be. But I do know from our data, from the 23-24 data, following a cohort of students that took 7th grade LEAP, 8th grade Algebra 1, those students from whether it was basic, mastery, or advanced, on average scored higher on the ACT, which is a combination of college readiness standards, than those that did not.
If we're all calling out our data points of interest, I'll go. My data point of interest here is relative to the foundational skills that might be missed for some students who are at the approaching basic or unsatisfactory that are taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So if you look at approaching basic and unsat, you have 203 and 39 kids. So you had 242 kids that scored unsat or approaching basic in 7th grade that were placed in Algebra 1 as 8th grade. I don't understand that because it seems to me like those students already have gaps in math skills that are only going to get worse if they're not addressed with the 8th grade skills. And so my data point that I wanted to share is just that if you look at those students, about 67% of them remain at that approaching basic or unsat on their Algebra 1 test. So, I mean, I know that with the leadership of the association, we've talked a good bit about which students might benefit from Algebra 1 in 8th grade and which ones might not. And so just to call out that those are the ones that I would be concerned about making sure that they're in the right course.
And also looking at the students who scored basic, that group of students also are students who are definitionally in 7th grade because they're basic. It's good to move them to 8th grade, but they are likely going to need additional support. And we not only moved them to the next grade, we skipped a whole thing. And you're seeing that the lion's share of them actually perform better on this Algebra 1 exam, which should point to something else that's occurring here, right? There is something else beyond like the acceleration is the answer here. Acceleration is something that is really good for a subset of students. It's a small group, but I wonder if you tracked those kids for a long time or you met with their math teachers, they might tell you that this kid required a lot of gap filling that other students didn't have. And that group of students, if they're not getting a very tailored and different type of instruction than the rest of the students in the class, they're going to fall behind long term.
So before we move forward, I want to point out two things. I think, and as Dr. Brumley said, there may be a request after this meeting from superintendents for some additional data points as we get ready for the Bessie meeting. To your point, Mr. Lambert, regarding seeing data for these students over a longer period of time, like comparing their geometry scores and or some of the other assessments that we may have, similar to what Dr. Wardling just talked about with ACT. Obviously, that's going to take a deeper dive, following students for multiple years. But the other thing is, to Dr. Brumley's point, to point out that if you go back to what this motion says, I believe the motion that Bessie will be considering for sake of the council is that there could be some policy language that would give districts direction on who we select for these classes. So as you can see from the data, there were students that had scored unsat, approaching basic for whatever. I don't know the reasons that school systems would put those students in, but there may be a recommendation for some policy language that would require that systems only consider students who make mastery or advance in 7th grade. Those are the only students that are considered for Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. So I do want to make sure that everybody understands that is, as I understand it, the language that could be considered at the Bessie meeting.
And I just want to point again, based on this data specifically, regardless of how students performed in 7th grade on the 7th grade leap, the achievement shows for the 23-24 students who scored basic in 7th grade, almost half, 48%, moved up to mastery, right, in 8th grade Algebra 1. 48%. Okay, so when we're using achievement levels, we need to make sure that we're looking across the board. For some students that don't perform well on that test in 7th grade, for whatever reason, there are situations. For the approaching basic students, 34% moved at least one achievement level, much more than the 20% that either maintained or went down. So while certainly that is the motion that's on the table, and we're, like, as you mentioned, Mr. Powell, we're going to request additional information. I think it's important for Bessie to consider all ranges of growth, not just the achievement levels, but even the half achievement level. Since we're moving into the new accountability system, where were students at relative to at least half of achievement level too? Because now that is a new standard relative to growth. So where is it, that could be another point that we could request data for, so that Bessie has a full range of data to look at when considering.
The other thing, I just did quick math, so correct me if I did it wrong. 85% of them were proficient in 8th grade. When you look at the 7th grade, it was 81%. So we're talking about a 4% delta there. Okay. So not huge. It is a difference, but it is not massive. Double testing, what the actual federal law that enables early math is, it's actually a waiver of double testing. So we did want to illuminate that about a fifth of the students who are taking Algebra 1 end of course in 8th grade are also taking the 8th grade math test. So we're not reducing their testing burden. They're actually sitting for both. And that's not because of state policy. That's a local decision that's being made. So we wanted to make folks aware of that. So what would happen to scores if you didn't include banking? And you see essentially 17 schools would see an improvement of between 0 and 0.6 points. 111 would see a decrease of none to 0.5, less than 1 to negative 0.5, 49 between 0.5 and 1 decrease. So you see that the amount of change or impact on a score is actually fairly small. Any questions here?
Yeah, Mr. Lambert, I know one question that came up with that is this based on current accountability, or is this based on new accountability?
New accountability.
Achieve piece.
That's right.
And for those schools, or for those districts that don't offer Algebra 1 now in 8th grade, are those folks in this mix?
They would have been
Because
they would have been a no impact.
correct. So for example, they would be no impact because they have no 8th grade banking to be considered, correct? So I'm just making sure, though, if you took those out, then what percentage would be impacted? It would have to be 100%, correct? You understand what I'm saying?
I think what Mr. Van Meter said is the 17 at the top that says improved, it says 0 to 0.6. Is that what you're saying?
So what I'm saying is, if you leave the districts in this chart that don't have 8th grade Algebra 1 now, and there are a bunch of those folks out there, it's going to skew these numbers because they're not considered, right?
Well, these are numbers, not percentages. We gave the numbers for a reason, right? So it's like, what is the actual impact on your individual school scores, right? So like The other thing is that it would be really hard for us to know without you telling us, because almost all of you are being impacted by banking, even if you don't offer it. Because when a kid moves in, if they already have a score, you take that score.
And I understand that, but let's say, for example, I don't think Vermillion offers 8th grade, right? The number of kids who move into Vermillion, let's say from Calcasieu, would be very small compared to leaving Vermillion in this chart, where Vermillion is going to skew this number because Vermillion doesn't offer these, right?
Yeah.
So this number gets skewed a little bit if you leave the schools, or the districts rather, however you want to count them, in this chart who are not offering 8th grade algebra now.
So let's ignore 0 for a minute. Let's ignore all the ones that had no impact, right? You're still looking at 111 that were less than a half a point impacted. You're still looking at less than 50, 49 that are between a half a point and 1 point impacted, right? So we're talking about a very small impact generally, yes.
In the new formula, and this is the new formula, I seem to recall that the difference between an A and a B and a B to a C was extremely tight.
That's a great question.
So 2 in the old formula didn't mean much. 2 in the new formula could mean 2 letter grades, maybe. I don't.
It wasn't quite that tight. So what this shows you is the change in letter grades. So same data, just instead of looking at how many points have changed, how many were impacted. 7 schools see an increase, 6 schools see a decrease. 1 school, starting at the top, 3 schools go from C to B, 2 schools go from D to C, 2 schools go from F to D, and then 1 goes from an A to a B, 4 go from a B to a C, and 1 goes from a C to a D.
But I guess the challenge with any of this, the projections on an accountability system that is not currently in place, nor processes and programs that have not been shifted to align to the Thrive component to give you an accurate representation of the school performance score, we're talking about data points that fundamentally don't exist. By taking one set of data and applying it to a formula that hasn't even been implemented yet in the school year, you cannot make projections on programs that haven't been and how they impacted the school performance score itself. So
that's
to
a
me,
great point. We shouldn't do any simulations for future accountability changes, right? Like
thank you for that respectful comment, but no, that's not the point I'm getting to, Mr. Thomas. The point is, for this particular point, you're talking about projections and simulations of applying something to an SPS where you truly do not know because we have not implemented it yet. It's going to take us 2-3 years to truly align ourselves with the new accountability system.
So what data can we provide?
To make an accurate judgment or present to us that this is going to be only a very small, we don't really know.
So what can we provide that would help you?
High school, and just kind of show the impact compared for us, and just a couple of follow-up questions. I do think it's very important that, you select the right students and that they're prepared to go into algebra or geometry at the middle school. We had 118 students who did that out of a cohort of 412 8th graders. And out of that group, all but 1 student made an advanced or mastery. And out of that, 91 of the 118 made an advanced. So we're very particular about, we don't have a lot of kids going in there who aren't scoring well. But what that also means is the 118 kids out of 412 who moved to high school, that's a 29% of my 9th grade kids. So when we go to report out high school proficiency, overnight, I could look like my high school proficiency just fell 25 or 30% overnight. So I'm trying to explain to my public that that's not really indicative of what's happening. But on the flip side of that, as a district, I start saying, I may as well go ahead and take an advanced or mastery at the middle school and then just move all kids into Algebra 1 at the 9th grade level or higher. But then that slows the math progressions. One other thing that's important about that is we've added some really well-intentioned and good idea courses, whether it's computer science or financial literacy, But as a school, we also offer a ton of extracurricular opportunities, a ton of, arts, theater, you name it. As kids take more courses, they begin to happen to take less of these electives. They have less opportunity. So again, if we start pushing that back to try to make an accountability piece at our school reflective of what's happening on campus, that could hurt us. The last thing is, I think the tight ranking is important too. While we may not see a huge shift in accountability, those numbers do translate to, you could have a school go from 20th to 40th. Well, people care about ranking. So again, I think that could reflect too. So I think one consideration, no matter where we land, would be, can we at least show proficiency at the end of high school to include those middle school scores, even if the ultimate decision is not to roll it into banking or accountability, which I would hope that's not the case. But if it is, we need to show that there were kids that were, proficient in middle school, but never had a chance to show that at high school because they've progressed too far. So I think that may be a middle of the road consideration too, because we don't want high schools to look like you have massive drops in proficiency when really it's kids have already tested out and no longer have the opportunity to show it.
Thank you, Mr. Nikes. We have Mr. Byler, who's been patiently waiting. Thank you, Mr. Byler.
I just have a question about simulation, whatever, but we need to recall that we're setting cut scores on the data we just did. We're setting cut scores on the year we bank scores, but then we're looking at information for not banking them. So I think it would be foolish for us to say we're not we've already changing the system enough. This is just another, number one, we didn't find out till February. And so schools had already made decisions. I just think, my personal choice would be that we delay it a year and everybody would have time. I just think we're setting cut scores because we say we're setting cut scores on by what we score this past year. And those kids are taking, you're not setting cut scores on kids who didn't take Algebra 1. That's not part of the formula. That's not part of the policy. The policy said we're setting cut scores on what our kids did on this last test. So those eighth graders are counting in our cut scores, which are going to be higher. Then next year we don't count them. We're not comparing apples to apples there on the accountability side because we said cut scores with them, and then the next year we're going to go with first year new accountability without them. I just think we're rushing into that. That was my only concern. Our implementation of this, if that's where we ultimately fall there. But the idea that this happened in, March or April is when we really truly understood this. The schools that do it, I don't have a dog in that fight, but the schools that do it, they've, number one, selling that to your community. Number two, and I shared that earlier, and I'm glad Mr. Nikes backed it up because I ran the numbers. It could drop a school 20 to 25%. And remember, we made an easier accountability system. Every box is equal. And so if you just take a 25% drop in a box, his school will drop, and it's not indicative of what his school offers. He's got 120 kids making advanced in mastery in the 8th grade, and they're one of our highest achieving school systems, and his kids are taking a 5th-year calculus math that he's going to have to make a decision and sell his public and say, yeah, we're not going to do it in the 8th grade because we don't like being 45th, because we can't convince the public that his school system is still great. I just feel like the implementation, my preference would be for us to hold it for a year, see what it does in the new accountability system. We always said when we started this process that we would move to a new accountability system and we would look at it, and if we had to make tweaks, we would make tweaks. I feel like if we do this, we're creating too many variables, and for us to truly look at year to year on where the tweaks can be made. It's a whole new system, and now we're throwing another kink into that system last minute. I don't think we're making great decisions of truly using data points that are equitable. And so that's just my stance on when you look at those numbers. We don't even know do we know what the cut scores are? Was it based on 23, 24?
It was based on 23, 24.
Correct. So with banking. And so that's just my only point. We're not comparing apples to apples when we look at the scores.
Thank you, Mr. Byler. Dr. Bartholomew. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council?
I just want to echo what Mr. Ballard has stated is that provide a launch pad. I would like, best to consider a launch pad relative to the banking policy, to be able to come back perhaps in a year and look at the data to make a more informed decision relative to this part and truly consider the impacts for our community, not the score itself. It's not about the score, but it certainly is about how we are presented to our communities, especially in the environment that our public schools are operating in, relative to school choice and all of those things that impact our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ortling. Any other?
I'd also like to add, I really don't have a problem because we do offer 8th grade algebra. I don't necessarily have a problem with limiting formally who's allowed into Algebra 1. So for example, if we keep it, right, and continue to bank, and part of the concern is we've got kids in there who are not prepared, fine. Like, we're self-limiting already, right? But if we want to formally limit those who are allowed into Algebra 1 in the 8th grade to be Mastery Plus, let's do it, right? I've got no problem with that at all. And I think that would hopefully eliminate some of the concerns that the department has in terms of allowing kids in there who aren't ready, right? So if that's the case, then let's focus on that piece, because one of the things I do see is if the Bessie board and the education department as a whole wants to continue to push kids, right, I think eliminating banking is going to pretty much be the death knell for having districts who don't have 8th grade algebra or English to add that, right? While we have it already, eliminating banking is going to stop a district who doesn't offer 8th grade from ever considering 8th grade algebra.
Dr. Voron?
I just have a question, and I might have missed this somewhere along the way. If a student is in 8th grade with the new accountability system, and whether they double block math, where they take 8th grade algebra or 8th grade math, and they take Algebra 1, or they just take the Algebra 1 course but take both tests. If they take both tests in the new system, do they both go somewhere?
In the old system, we'll start with the old system. In the old system, if the student took both tests, the score that counted at the middle school was the 8th grade score. And then the algebra score
Was
followed.
banked to the following.
Yes,
In the new system, does one of them just not count at all?
correct, because it's not banked.
So why wouldn't it count in the Algebra 1 score for the same year?
That would be a very different thing from what the old policy was also.
Right, but we have a new policy, and if a kid is taking the 9th grade algebra, we can have a kid in 10th grade that takes Algebra 1 for the first time. We can have a kid who moves in somewhere else, whatever, and takes it in whatever grade. It would count in that Algebra 1 score. It doesn't seem as though it should matter what grade the student is in. What should matter is the course that they're in, which is no different than civics. If a kid is in 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th, they take the civics exam. And as things progress with where those civic scores land, it doesn't go into a 10th grade social studies test. It goes into a civics test. Why can't Algebra 1, English 1 work the same way if a kid is taking the 8th grade LEAP and they're taking the high school assessment in 8th grade?
So you're saying to count it at the 8th grade school, count one of them, count them both at the 8th grade school? Or I'm trying to understand where you're asking me to put that score.
I've got 7th through 12th grade campuses.
Okay.
Or kindergarten through 12th grade campuses. They're on the same campus. So if a kid is in 8th grade and they took the 8th grade math LEAP, that score should go in the 8th grade math LEAP scores. And they took the Algebra 1 exam, doesn't matter what grade they're in, it's course driven. Then that should count in the Algebra 1 high school score. I mean, has there been any consideration to that? Now, it may take you 1 year of lag of data for it to be longitudinal over time. But whatever the kid did on there, and then it's up to the district if they want to double test them or not. It's up to the district already if they want to double test them or not. But I think it would solve some of this concern where the first year you would see this jump, and then over the second year, over time, it would just make sense at that point. But I think we're categorizing these things by grade levels. Algebra 1's not necessarily a grade level exam.
So you're saying count the 8th grade score where the 8th grader was, and then carry the Algebra 1 score forward?
Not carry it forward, place it in the Algebra 1 score for the testing year.
I'm not understanding. I don't understand.
Well, that's the ones I'm advocating for.
Right.
I understand your point. You want to take the time they take.
Dr. Bartholomew is ready to speak this time, so I'd like to give him an opportunity to have the microphone.
Couple people follow Thomas.
There you go.
Two concerns. Well, 2 points here. The data that you showed us was high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that it's not going to impact the high school scores as much, or based on whatever those numbers are, right?
It won't impact elementary schools in the simulation at all, right? Because there's no change to the way that they're impacted. It only would impact high school scores or schools that have high school grades. So a 7 through 12 would be impacted, but anybody that has just K through 8 would not be impacted.
We're saying that our students are scoring higher on the Algebra 1 test than they did on the 7th grade assessment, correct?
Yes.
So in fact, they're scoring higher, meaning that their scores are increasing at the high school level, but not at the middle school level.
Most kids in 8th grade are not taking the algebra exam. They're taking the 8th grade exam. Like 85, what was it? It was 15% of them take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So 85% of them are taking 8th grade math. So it would be a small impact on those scores. And the banking impact is on the high school because that's where the score is getting used again. Does that make sense?
Yes. So those kids going to take the 8th grade test, what we're saying is they're gonna score the same. From 7th grade to 8th grade, their scores are gonna be the same.
Or grow, hopefully.
Yeah, or grow, yeah.
But we don't have that data, but we have the high school piece. But we're saying that the high school, from a 7th grader taking the high school Algebra 1 test, the scores are gonna increase a large percentage of those kids. What I'm concerned with is we don't have the data on those kids taking the 8th grade test. We know that the Algebra 1 test is going to increase, but we don't know if the 8th grade test, those kids take the 8th grade test, will they increase at the same rate?
I think that'd be a hard question to answer. If a kid, well, I guess we could look at there's that 1,000 kids that took both. We could look at that.
I guess the question is, we understand that the high school piece kids are increasing, but I don't know if those kids going to 8th grade they're increasing because at the same rate. Because if they're not increasing at the same rate and we're accepting them in the Algebra 1 class, that means our scores, we're receiving a higher score for that kid than we would normally get in 8th grade because the rate of increase is not the same. If there is an increase, because we're testing, and I think your analogy was that our kids focus really on 2 domains for Algebra 1, but they're focusing on several different domains for 8th grade. And part of the reason why our kids are doing better, I'm assuming that's what you meant, is because they're focusing on less. But if they're taking the 8th grade assessment, they're focusing on more. So I'm using that correlation that's saying, I don't think they're going to do better because they're focusing on more domains versus the Algebra 1 test, which they're only focusing on 2. So that's the question there. Also, I think it's important for us not to eliminate parent choice and hurt the school system. because I have several parents. I sent out a survey to my parents, and I said, hey, would you prefer your child taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade? And a lot of our parents, students who can perform well on Algebra 1 tests, they requested that their child take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. I'm concerned that if we are not receiving any type of points or any banking, I'm concerned that we don't offer that to the parent, and that eliminates their choice. So I'm just putting that out there as well. And I don't want the school system to suffer if a parent decides to say, I'm gonna pull my kid and I'm gonna send them somewhere else so they could take Algebra 1. Those 2 points.
So we've got a couple people in queue. I want to remind the council of a couple things, and then we'll also open up to public comment. Again, this council has the ability to just accept the information that's been provided, to endorse, not endorse. But in this particular case, we can make a recommendation that comes out of SAC. If anybody wanted to offer something that this council could then send to Bessie as the recommendation from the Superintendent Advisory Council, as this is something that's been put on the agenda at the request of Bessie. Bessie will be considering this at the next Bessie meeting, and so we can make a recommendation for Bessie to consider that recommendation that comes from SAC. So I just want to kind of put that out there. So I know we had a couple more people, Mr. Byler, Dr. Ortling. Did y'all still have something to say before we open up to public comment as well?
Just from Dr. Bartholomew, because we did run the numbers, the 1,346 students that took both the LEAP and the Algebra 1, and these are the statistics according to 23-24 data. The students that scored advanced in 7th grade LEAP, who took the 8th grade LEAP and the Algebra 1 LEAP, 98% of them remained advanced, 99 in 8th grade LEAP, 99% went up to advanced in Algebra 1. Mastery, those who were mastery in 7th grade, 788 students, 86% of them scored mastery or above. 80 in 8th grade LEAP, 88% scored mastery above in Algebra 1 mastery or above. Basic students, 285 students scored basic in 7th grade LEAP. On the 8th grade LEAP, 23% of those students scored mastery or above, while 31% of them scored mastery above on the Algebra 1. So in every category down the line, all students, regardless whether it's approaching basic, mastery, or advanced, tended to do better on the Algebra 1 LEAP, which, to Mr. Lambert's point, you are assessing slightly different standards. But I go back to my original point with the ACT. What standards are really preparing our students for college and career readiness, based on the other data points relative to where those students are by the time they took the ACT, the ones that took the Algebra 1 earlier, and the ones that don't. To me, that's when we're talking about student achievement and how we're growing students, preparing them, those correlations are also important. But I just wanted to share that because you asked that question.
Any additional comments or questions from the council? Dr. Fountain?
Just a quick question. What was the original reasoning for not wanting to do the banking? I'm just curious of the rationale originally on that.
Mr. Lambert, if I can address this just for, and then you can give us so what happened is when accountability was approved and the department began to start explaining to districts, okay, here are all the implications to accountability. As I understand it, this question was posed and nobody had addressed it prior to the question being posed. And there may have been some understanding that this was a natural implication to the new accountability, but nobody really knew that. And so once the question, to Mr. Byler's point from earlier, none of us knew this particular implication to the policy. Whether we agree with it or not, the main issue for us as systems at this point is we completed our staffing, we have our master schedules, and so now this obviously, whatever decision Bessie makes here is going to make a difference in that. So I think it was one of those things that once it became a realization that this was one of the, whether intended or unintended consequences of new accountability, that's why it's now part of this discussion of whether or not that was the intention or whether it wasn't. Should we do it? Should we not do it? So I don't know if that specifically answers your question. That's how we got here with it.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, from a philosophical standpoint, what's the?
I think people can make a lot of good reasoned arguments on both sides. I heard some really good ones today around like why it's important for the public to not see their high school score decline so rapidly because of the makeup of their testing population. So that's one really good argument on that front. I think other people might say that you didn't teach that child, right? That high school didn't teach that child, so why should that score go in? Which is why the old accountability system had all of those weird, if they scored below this, then you don't have to bank the score. But there were some schools that the old system actually hurt their score. Magnet schools particularly would get kids that came to them with a banked Algebra 1 score, and it was a basic. And because you got points for basic, that school had to carry that basic forward. So a school that had 100% of their kids at mastery and some of them at advanced actually got hurt by this policy historically. So I think that would be the most reasoned argument that somebody would make. It's not a kid that you taught at the high school.
And my only, because that was one of the reasons as I spoke to people that I kind of heard, and I said, I mean, it goes back to the whole coherence piece, kind of like Zachary, we're one feeder school. So obviously what's going on in the middle school impacts the high school, and we're one system. They're not two totally separate schools. So my argument in that case would be we're one system. We are really working on this coherence piece, which I love, and we've done a lot of work on that, like Jeff was saying. And so I'm just wondering philosophically, I mean, that's why I said it. If there's a reason, I think we're smart enough to look at that and think through that. I was just curious, because to me, if they're taking it in 8th grade, I don't understand the argument that because it was taught at my 8th grade school, that the 9th grade school would not, benefit potentially from that. That was just the point.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Dr. Joseph?
Same. At the end of the day, for me in my district, I just had this question. So if we decide to continue providing Algebra 1 in 8th grade this school year, what's going to happen? That's my question. What's going to happen with regard to accountability? What's going to happen with the kids' scores?
Current accountability, the scores would stay at the 8th grade. So the 8th grade would be the place where those scores counted.
And they would be considered an initial test taker?
If they were initial tester, yes.
So
So if they took out
the benefits that I looked at for this, it was about the kid. I'm about the kid. So my 8th graders would take their 8th grade test, LEAP test, and then they would take the Algebra 1 test. If they were not successful on the test, then they would move to 9th grade and they would take Algebra 1 full course in 9th grade, and they would be considered an initial test taker.
They would not be an initial test taker because they had already taken the test when they go to high school.
If they took what was told to me is that when they took the 8th grade math test, the LEAP test, and they took Algebra 1, if they were not successful on the test, they would be considered an initial test taker in 9th grade. So it won't count against them.
That was the old policy.
Correct. So now you're telling me no matter what grade that they take the test, they are going to be considered an initial test taker.
Yes.
You really killing us.
Okay.
Wait, I want to respond to that. Nobody's killing you, Dr. Joseph. What is hurting is when kids are what is hurting is whenever kids are graduating high school not ready for college or career. And we have nuanced conversations to have. We're having them in this room. We've had them with leadership. We're having them with Bessie. We have a revised accountability system that could be a catalyst for growth academically of students in the state of Louisiana. No one here is killing you or kids. And I think that's an exaggerated use of language that coming from you is rich right now. So I think we need to tone that down, deal with the nuance of a situation, provide Bessie with information so that more kids are graduating high school ready for career or college or service.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And I will not apologize for the terms that I am using, because that's exactly what is happening.
So at this point, from the council, is anyone willing or interested in making a recommendation from this council to Bessie?
Before that, I just have one last comment, because I heard about the score wouldn't count if the school didn't teach the kid. In the scenario that I'm referring to in our district, the school does teach the kid. Depending upon subgroups, the denominators may be different anyway with the new accountability system. So I would just ask for consideration that in those 7th through 12th grade schools, if I've got a subgroup that is very tiny, that's going to count for 8.3% of the score because they have 15 EL kids, if I've got a school that's testing 40 kids in Algebra 1 and they test in 8th grade, that then counts in an accountability system as well, where both scores are counted for that kid.
I think I understand what you're asking. I'm going to come talk to you after.
I'd like to make a motion to, and we have the option to receive, Mr. Powell, can you repeat our options? Receive, endorse?
We have the option to receive, endorse, or not endorse, or we can offer, in this case, this was sent to SAC by Bessie for consideration. So I believe we can make a recommendation to Bessie as far as from this council, what we would like to see them do.
I'd like to make a motion as a recommendation to Bessie to continue using the current practice as aligned to the old accountability system relative to those scores being retained at the high school level, and come back in at least a year to reevaluate after the collection of the actual data going into next year.
Can I offer you a piece of potentially helpful information? If you do exactly that, you will force the banking of basics to the high schools, which would give them a 0. So you would want to say that slightly differently, to not continue the practice, but I'm just trying to avoid a nuanced.
Yeah, it sounds like something we should be appreciative. Can you repeat what you said, though?
So the existing policy was that if a student scored basic or above, the score carried forward, period. So when a score came to the high school, if they were a basic, that's what went into the score. In the new accountability system, basic gets you 0, not 80, right? So if we continue, so however y'all want to word that, but.
So the motion or recommendation should say something to the effect that they would bank only proficient scores for the high school?
I disagree with that. I think it needs to be it's the same policy that we set the cut scores on. We need to go a year with the same policy that we set the cut scores on. We set the cut scores with that same policy that if you got a basic, you got a 0. If you think a kid's going to be a basic, goes to Dr. Brumley's point, we got to put the right kids into the course. If we're putting kids at approaching basic and unsat that we saw, and they get a basic, that's a school system's fundamental issue. We got to put the right kids. We got to teach them the same way in the 8th. I mean, I don't think we should. I don't think if a kid makes a basic, he makes a basic. We shouldn't give them a second chance for that. I think we go with the policy as is, as Dr. Ortling said. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Martin. Okay, so thank you for the input with that, Mr. Lambert. So back to the recommendation from Dr. Ortling, seconded by Mr. Geis, is to recommend to Bessie to continue the current practice of banking for at least another year until we can review how the data is impacting under new accountability.
That's correct.
Second by Mr. Geis. All in favor? I'm sorry, we have not opened up for public comment yet. So do we have any public comment on this motion?
This is slightly off the subject, but I think this is what, by the way, my name is Conrad Appel. I'm an at-large member of Bessie and previous member of the Senate Education Committee for a long time. If we could focus on the very bottom line and we look at the statistics that are there, if you add up the unsatisfactory, approaching basic, and basic, that represents nearly 75% of students in 8th grade. That's the big picture problem we have. It's off the subject of this motion, but it's not off the subject of this motion. So what we at Bessie, what we're looking at is how do we ratchet up those numbers? Because let me tell you something, I've spent 50 years in business. Basic in math is useless. That's about as good as you got out of kindergarten as far as business. So that means you're dooming graduates. And by the way, the numbers I've seen, which I don't have today, maybe Thomas could comment on it, is the high school graduation numbers aren't much different from this. We really don't see any progress from this point forward. So what we're looking at, Bessie, is you can't make a quality citizen have a quality job in this world if you're basic or below. So I don't know, this was just poignant to me when these numbers were popped up a few seconds ago, how big the significant data is. So what I'm challenging you all is help us find ways to change that worldview. Help us find ways to improve. We need mastery. We need a lot of mastery. Then the subject of whether the banking or not becomes somewhat more insignificant. Right now, we're not doing well. We can rank better in the national averages and all that, but we're not graduating kids that can have the math skills to go into the real world and make a difference for Louisiana. And that's all I wanted to say. I know tutoring is a big focus, and that's great. But that's a Band-Aid. We're putting a Band-Aid over a fundamental problem. Maybe the problem is that early childhood preparation isn't enough. Maybe the problem is that early grades of school education, mathematics education is not enough. So we're having to apply the Band-Aid of tutoring to make up for some fundamental problems that exist earlier. I don't know what they are. I'm not an expert in this. But I just wanted to point this out. Despite all the discussions about rankings and statistics and all that, that 75% jumps out at me and bites me right where it hurts. And I just wanted to point that out to everybody and let you know that's what we, at least I and others on Bessie, are focused on, is how to improve that number so that at the end of the day, we don't have 75% basic or below. We have 75% basic and above. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Akbel. Any other public comments? President Morris. Dr. Armstrong.
The point of clarification. So are we going to go back, are we asking to go back to the old system of banking? Because what was deferred to the Accountability Council and to SACS was the policy that we were looking at, that the students had to be mastery or above. And so that kind of changes what our recommendation was that came. So I'm just wanting point of clarification. Are we looking at who can take the Algebra 1 in 8th grade? Are we looking at everybody and going back to the old system? That's all I need clarification.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. I'll let Dr. Ortling clarify his motion.
The motion was to keep in place the old policy, which, to your point, Dr. Armstrong, would remove the mastery and above, because we haven't discussed that part about what criteria would be required for those students to remain in 8th grade Algebra 1.
With that understanding, Mr. Geis, you had seconded that motion. Are you're still in favor of seconding that? Or does anybody offer any other recommendation? Okay, that's the motion on the table. Mr. Morris, President Morris.
Thank you. Just remind my colleagues, be sure and fill out your comment card. I get reminded of that routinely. So
that there are no public comments. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so I want to start out with a positive note and just say that appreciate the spirit of the conversation. We're obviously all here, focused here on the best interest of our students. So I want to start out by just recognizing that, um, we do have the opportunity for eighth grade students to take Algebra 1. That provides them an opportunity to take the advanced math class the senior year, which we know is critical to our state. There's certainly a demand for that going forward, particularly with all the high-tech investment coming to our state, the engineering requirements with that, the math is going to be required. So we need to address that fundamental need in our state going forward. So it's important that we do have that opportunity. And the positive note here is that with the 15% of our students that are taking Algebra 1 in eighth grade, that we've got such a high success rate, proficient and above. So kudos to all you guys that have made that opportunity available to our students, and kudos to you guys for the outcomes that we've received. What I heard was, there's a very small percentage here that they're probably not in their best interest to be in the class, but it's a relatively small percentage. So at 85%, that's almost an A on our new 10-point scale. So we got a B plus on that one. I think that's a positive, and just want to recognize that. When I look at Bessie's role here, and I consider the superintendent's perspective, operation of the school district, when I consider the student's perspective, and when I consider the parents' perspective. We're all super excited about the academic achievements our students have made the last 4 years. A lot of questions are up in the air right now. Where are we going next? And how are we going to get there? In my mind, basically the efforts that you guys have put in place, the student outcomes, it really reflects the policy changes that have been made. It really reflects a rebranding of K-12 education in the state of Louisiana. And it's really important now that we've got this opportunity to rebrand our product, that people appreciate that it is a quality product. It's not, we're 49th in the country, thank God for Mississippi, right? That story doesn't exist anymore. It's a new paradigm. We're 32nd in the country. The question is now, what's on the next hilltop, and how do we get there? Personally, I think one of the key fundamentals we need to think about with that is the foundation that we set to get there. We want to make sure it's transparent. We want to make sure it's credible, and there's no question about our integrity. I think those are essential fundamentals regardless of whatever we decide. Whenever we look at this one particular issue, I just want to thank my colleague, Senator Appel, because while it is important that 15% of our students get this opportunity, when I talked to Mr. Lambert about the student population that's taken the Algebra 1 in ninth grade, it's 50% of that 90% that score proficient or better. So how are we addressing that 50%? That's obviously a larger number than the 50% of the entire population. To me, that's where we should focus our concern. How do we address that? How do we get those students in a place where they're set up for success? Because as he said, if they want to be competitive in the workplace, basic is not gonna do the job. So I'd like to hopefully refocus some of our attention to that student population. But with regard to this particular conversation and the conversation around banking, the primary concern, again, that I have is transparency and the credibility that comes with that. If I'm a parent and I'm shopping high schools, then yeah, I'm going to look at the letter grade. I'm going to look at what does the school potentially offer for my child. But in my mind, the accountability system is about some way to quantify value in that system. And if I've got a high school that is taking credit for work that's done in a middle school, that value doesn't reflect what I'm advertising to the public. And I think that's extremely important, is that we're transparent with the public, what we're, the message we're bringing to the public, is the value that we provide in our school. And so when we get to this down in the weeds about the calculation for banking and whatnot, I had a couple questions for Mr. Lambert. Hope he can help me out. The first one is the simulations that are run, the purpose is to provide a base case. The base case is a do-nothing case. If everybody in this room does nothing, then we're not going to progress. But we have to know where do we start. So the simulations are purposed to provide a base case. And school systems are given a year with the new accountability system in place to invest resources, invest funds appropriately so they improve the base case. The numbers that are running the simulation provide the do-nothing case. So if I do nothing, I would expect my score is going to go down. I don't know how 7 increase, but I don't think anybody in this room plans to be in the do-nothing case. But that's what the simulation does, is it provides the base case, which is do nothing. And then if I look at the significance of this one particular issue, my understanding is that the widest gap was a 0.6. Is that correct, Mr. Lambert? Based on the previous slide? Can you go? Yeah, there you go. That's it right there. That's the largest for the improved. You're showing 0 to 0.6 at 17, 0 to 0.05. I'm sorry, to 0.5, 111. So those numbers are on a 100-point scale. Is that right? So I'm looking at 2% on a 100-point scale. Okay, so if I'm looking at a 1 or a 2 on a 100-point scale, what is the range of each bandwidth? So how in that A frame, B frame, C frame?
They vary. Schools are chunked pretty close together in some cases, but they're 10-ish points. There's not very many places where it's less than 8.
But it's a 100-point scale, and you got 5 ranges, right? So if they were all the same, that would be 20 each, right?
Right, but also the curve is skewed, or the population is skewed this way. So you're really putting them between much lower than 100 as your top, right? Like your top 10% is going to range from the 50s to 95. I don't know what the highest score was, but
my point was just simply the order of magnitude that we're talking about this whole conversation, right? It's a 0.6 on a 100-point scale. My next question was, using the 23-24 data, which is for the base case, and using banking, does that raise the cut points or lower the cut points?
It would lower the cut points, so it would be easier to get an A.
Using banking?
If you remove banking.
No, I said using banking.
If you remove banking, it would.
No, but my question was if you use banking.
If you use banking, it raises a cut point.
So if you use banking, it raises the cut points. So that makes it more difficult for a school system to achieve that next letter grade. Is that right?
It's a higher cut point.
It's a higher cut point. So it's a higher bar to achieve. So if you use banking using the 23-24 data for your base case, it raises the bar for everybody. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And if school systems want to raise the bar for everybody, then I guess we can do that, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. Going back to the parental perspective and where's the value in this, and how do we make sure that we do provide those opportunities for those students that are prepared and are interested in the Algebra 1 course. My suggestion would be that we consider other approaches to make sure we have the appropriate incentive to offer those classes in the middle school. If we put certain criteria around students that are qualified, maybe there's something in the system where we recognize the incremental value in the middle school for the middle school so that the middle schools get credit for the work that's done in the middle school. I'm certainly open to other approaches to recognize value where it exists. And if we need to put more incentive in the middle school to recognize that value because we believe there is significant value there that is required, incentives are required to offer the class, let's have that conversation. But I cannot support, from a parent's perspective and from a Bessie perspective, artificially inflating high school scores on work that's not done in the high school just for the optics. Whenever as an adult, I think we're the model for our children. We set the example. Students go to school, there's an honor code. They're expected to comply with the honor code. The honor code is you're accountable for your work. If you use somebody else's work and you want to take credit for somebody else's work, you either fail the class or you get kicked out of school. I can assure you that's the policy at Vanderbilt University right now. And so as we think about path forward here, how we're going to build a foundation for our future, I would just encourage us all again to think about how we're going to get there. Let's make sure that it's a solid foundation and we're not inflating it just for optics. Thank you.
Thank you, President Morris. We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, with that, the motion carries. I'll entertain, that was the last item on our agenda, as I understand it. The next Superintendent Advisory Council meeting is scheduled for September 18th, 2025. We hope everybody is able to make that. If there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I got a motion by Mr. Van Meter and a second by Dr. Stokes. Thank you. All right. I need to get the guy. That's supposed to be. Good job. Thank you. There we go.